Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions on media production. If you're new around here and you want to get your questions into us, you can do that by going to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, and there's no login, no sign up. If you want to take it to the next level and join our Makana system, that's a great way to go, where you can vote on questions so that you can help us direct the show, also chat with the other producers. And we're going to do a full day of Q&A today, so we're excited to answer the questions that you've got. Alexander, what do we have?
First question this morning is from Douglas Carmichael. Oliver Breidenbach used the analogy of the punch card model to describe traditional live video workflows and how mimoLive took a different approach. Discuss.
Alex?
Yeah, I use mimoLive and the punch cards. So I use a little bit of both of these, and I would say that there is something about when you're using Mimo that you really realize that you are using something that is completely not designed around anything from the past. And it really was hard for me to, kind of get over that. I expect certain things to be there and I expect certain things to work a certain way. But I will say that there are a lot of things that allow me to do things in Mimo that I wouldn't be able to do as easily in some of the other ones. The layer set idea, and more importantly, the iPad view that I have. So I have an iPad view that allows me to kind of program an interface, and I think that is probably the thing that, combined with the layer sets, does make it much easier to run a show. I will say that it's harder for me in Mimo to, unless I build layer sets for it, it's harder for me to get to something that I didn't plan for. So I think that the old-fashioned way where I have a switcher in front of me, there's a lot of things that I can do very quickly and get to different things, where that can be a little bit harder, I find, in mimoLive. But for a show that I know how this is going to go, and I have a lot, and I've thought through it, Mimo is a very, very great way to just kind of make things. If I was going to set something up for a daily show, and we have to remember that 90% of our live stuff, 95% of our live stuff is something that is relatively the same, and you've thought about everything that could happen over and over and over again. There's not that much live that is that isn't part of largely a cookie cutter solution. If it's happening regularly. So I think that it's two different things. It's not something I don't look at myself if I'm going to use mimoLive for everything, but for like the Michael Krasny show, Gray Matter with Michael Krasny, it's perfect. And for the fireside chat that I did with Colleen Henry, it was perfect. I was able to just kind of have it all working, and I have an iPad, and I just simply tap on the things that I want. So it just depends. I think with everything, I don't think it's all or nothing. I think that there's a time when this kind of new approach works really, really effectively, and there are times when I want to have the flexibility of the punch card, and be able to, move around on a larger switch, on a 4ME switcher, and do what I need to do.
Courtney?
I was wondering if I'm not familiar with the punch card model. Can you explain a little bit?
I think he's just referring to regular switchers, regular live switchers. Like a big console that sits in front of you. Because one of the things that I have found is that after using the iPad interface that I'm now using for Mimo, I really want that for the ATEM. I really want, when I'm doing a show, I'd love to have something where I could just keep designing where all the buttons sit, and be able to just kind of keep designing the show interface, much like we do for this show. We have Universe, and the show is that the buttons and everything else are designed where they need to be. They're not something that is driven by a piece of hardware.
Oh, so it's not something like I was thinking punch cards, like a computer punch cards. Everything's
no. He's just saying it's old fashioned,
not pre-programmed.
He's just doing
switched on the fly, as we say.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'll admit, I was where Courtney was. I said punch cards. I wonder what this is. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we developed something called the One Button Studio, and the whole thing is built around mimoLive. A lot of people don't realize what's under the hood, and the real simplicity of it is those buttons. And we made big buttons. We wound up using an iPhone, so we would buy cheap iPhones, and we would put those buttons on there so it became a touch screen. But it's pretty brilliant when you go in there and you figure out how it works. It's really simple compared to Universe. I spent a lot of time in Universe trying to make it do what I wanted it to, and mimoLive is so much easier. And now with the faster processors, it's amazing what the capability of that is. I have it running. Well, I have Oliver's computer running here in my Cochrane cloud. He's got an M2 Ultra over there, and we're running 8 copies of mimoLive to push eight bots into a meeting to run tests, because Ecamm yesterday came out with their beta, and so it's interesting to see where else we could push these bots into until we can get the one up in after hours again, which, Alex? When are we going to get those bots back in after hours?
Soon.
Alex?
Soon. Okay.
I will say that the interface to build that again happened so quickly. I mean, I once I figured out how to get it to pop up, once I found it, it was like 15 or 20 minutes of me not quite understanding the nomenclature of how it worked. And then 20 minutes later, I mean, within an hour, I had a whole interface. And now I just keep tweaking it. Like I open it up to edit it and I go, I wish that button was just a little higher. I wish this was a little bit bigger. I wish this was a little smaller. And it's not just that you have a button that is connected to an operation. You have a button that can be a macro. So I say, when I push this button, I want you to start. Like I have it so it starts all the records and streams when I push this button. Just everything gets turned on. And so there's a whole bunch of actions that can be taken all at one time. So and people have been doing this with Companion, and they've been doing it with Stream Decks and so on. And you can tie it to Stream Decks, of course. But there's something about it for me of I find this to be the lowest lift I've ever had in being able to automate, an interface and build that out has been this one. I mean, I'm playing with Universe. I've done some stuff in Companion, and this is this is 1/10 the lift to build that interface. And so hopefully, again, I found myself missing it. I love Mix Effect Pro, and I use it for a lot. It's transformed how I do super sources and everything else. But I realized playing with Mimo's interface that what I really wanted was not Mix Effect Pro to duplicate what is on the switcher, the interface and those types of things, but really rethink that and give me an interface that would let me do that. And we'll see if somebody comes up with something like that. But right now, Mimo does it, and it works great.
Next question.
Next question's from Paul Walhusen on Hot Springs. How do you do mixes of songs now? Would you use this new tool? And there's a TechCrunch article there.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I don't do mixes anymore, Paul, because my DJ days are over, unfortunately. I looked at the article, and the article was kind of hinting that Spotify is coming out with a new piece of software. They didn't have any demonstrations of it, just a description of it that lets you be your own DJ and create mixes that go from one song to the next song, and it lets you now these kind of tools have been out there for DJs for many years now that let you transition from one song to the next song by synchronizing the second song with the beat of the first outgoing song, synchronizing the beat and making a crossfade right at the end of the first song into the second song without the beat changing. Sometimes they'll actually change the speed and tempo and pitch shift the incoming song briefly so that they'll synchronize if the beats are different meters. What I was thinking they were talking about, but this really hadn't been done with streaming. I don't know if it's been done with streaming songs before, so that's kind of the difference. It's in development apparently at Spotify, but hasn't been released yet. What I was thinking is I've seen several demonstrations of AI software now that will take, and Alex, I think his daughter has been using some where it takes a stereo mix song and lets you single out. AI will filter out the individual instruments and give you faders for each one of them, so it lets you actually remix the balance of the song throughout, so you can make your own version of a song. If I'm right there, Alex, but that apparently is not what this is.
No, yeah, it is. It's called. Oh, now I know. I just Moises. My daughter uses it every day, so she uses it to rehearse, because she's playing drums or bass or other things. And she uses it to be able to separate those instruments out so that she can listen to them individually and play to them and then take them out and play with the song. And because of the way her keyboard and her electronic drums work, she can listen to the mix of her drums. For instance, right now she's playing a lot of drums. so it's a mix of her drums with the song she's playing with, but she's removed the drums using Moises to pull that out. And so those tools are really interesting. I don't think that's what Spotify's doing here. I think Spotify's simply doing pitch changes and crossfades and those types of things. I think that I think they're thinking way too hard. Looking at what they have here, if what's missing is if I have this track and I have this track, all I need is to be able to define what this gap is, so how far I overlap them, and I need a B-spline or a B-spline that goes here, here, and here, 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 and here. I've thought about this for a long time. That's all I need to build great mixes, because people are not going to be able to figure out all the stuff that's in this stack of Spotify. Maybe they won't get to it, But if you just do what I just showed you here, this is building the crossfade of each song and how it fades into the other one. And you're able to sit there and listen to it, nudge it, maybe snap to beats, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be beat matched. I mean, I did a lot of beat matching because I used to do raves. And so you could definitely do that. You could have it automatically, just stretch it so that it matches the beat if you want to. But what you want to do is have it elastic. So you want it to stretch and be a little slower and then pick up speeds over the next minutes until it's back to its normal pace, those types of things. And so which is what you would do manually on a 1200, and so the main thing though is that being able to, and I used to make all my mixtapes this way. So because I was a DJ, I had a mixing console at home and I had two 1200s at home. I had all the things that I needed. And so I would mix people tapes all the time. That's how I made a mixtape, was to crossfade everything together, beat mix everything together, make it all work. I don't think the beat mixing matters as much. As I went into doing, weddings, because they pay more than raves, I realized that just a great crossfade between one to the other was enough to make that work. And people would be able to build, the average person could build a mixtape that they would love, and it would make a huge difference. There's some songs that just belong together. If you mix them together, they just kind of fade into the next one, and it just becomes this kind of dream of music that goes from one place to the other. I think it's a great idea, and I think that I've been telling people that have these things for a decade that, hey, we need crossfades. Not like 2-second crossfade, but like crossfades that we can control. And I think this is one step towards that. The other steps that they can think about is allowing people to insert their own their own commentary, possibly even live. And then secondly, being able to build kind of a recommendation engine that's based on people that correlate with them, that they can choose. You start adding those things together and you end up with a much different experience than what you have now. So I think they're going the right direction. From what it shows here, I think they're thinking too hard. I think they're basically overbuilding something that will be too complicated to use if they actually put that out. I think that if they just started with giving people great crossfades, just those B-splines, and let them push them over, if that's all they did in version 1, it'd be a huge success.
Next question.
Next question is from the QR code. Ryan Clark in Dallas, Georgia asks, when will there be an episode on automation? Stream Deck, BitFocus Companion, macros, etc. Those are my favorite episodes. I really appreciate the show and all the information. Thank you guys for everything you do.
Go ahead, Jason.
Ryan, you mean when will there be another episode because you like them so much? We love them too, and just keep posted because we do them regularly.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, be sure to put that in the Discord for a second hour to get voted up. There's some really interesting stuff that Tucker, Jonas, Chirig, these guys are doing with Stream Decks and Companion, and also Central Control. So we're using Central Control with these X-Touch, these Behringer X-Touch units, and we do a show every couple weeks where we all have one. Australia has one, Germany has one, North Carolina and Tucker has one, and it's funny, I'll put this little ball on my mixer and they'll move it from around the world. They can move this ball by moving the faders, and it happens in real time. So it's really cool to see this level of automation where they push a button or they move something and all these buttons change. And for that same show, we're using vMix, but as an operator, I never see vMix. I actually just run a Stream Deck, and when I push one button, it pushes buttons in 2 data centers running 2 copies of vMix using Companion Satellite. So there's some automation out there that's super, super cool that these guys developed. I mean, it's way engineered, like over my head. Like the stuff that they've done to make it fire off 2 instances is just remarkable, so that we'd have this incredible stability. So if for some reason the East Coast disappeared, we still have the West Coast. So it's really cool to see stuff when engineers, say, hey, what do you need? What needs to be done? And then they develop around it. But a lot of it came from American Heart Association. Actually, they do these automated, since COVID, they had a lot of remote operators. And so they didn't want them to use vMix. They just wanted them to use Companion. And so they developed all these automations just using a button. So all they need is a multi-viewer and a Stream Deck and Companion Satellite, and they're off and running. So it's pretty cool when you can even do things like punch in on a 2-up. So if a lot of times we'll have 2 people side by side, and sometimes they'll be off center a little bit. You can even do remote PTZ. So that'll be page 3. I just jump over to page 3, move their head a little bit, and they take it. So it's pretty amazing the stuff that you can do when you have a need and you have smart engineers that can put that stuff together. So I'm excited we can get Tucker Jonas and Jurig in for a second hour.
Next question.
From the QR code, Carson Jones in Coburg, Canada, grading in Resolve on a PC and render out to Rec 709 Gamma 2.2 for web content. Everything matches up and looks great until it hits a user's Mac OS computer, and then it looks awful. Gamma mismatch, Colorsync Gamma 1.96, possible solutions.
Jason?
Without more information, this is going to be tough to guess about. Yeah, I think you may very well be on the right track for a Gamma 2.2. Scopes are your friend here. Really what you should do is take that output and put it back into something that has scopes. Also in Windows, there are so many different profiles in trying to render any sort of high-end color. I would start by turning off HDR color. So start button and then settings, system display, and then Windows HD color settings. And then turn off that use HDR. It may be tying in with your codec in some strange way. This is really hard to guess about. But yeah, I think you're on the right track when it comes to Gamma.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I know, Alex. I haven't run into this problem yet, but maybe it depends on the H.264 version that you're rendering out to for web contact. Alex, I know you've always hated Resolves and advised never, ever use the Resolve encoder for encoding H.264, at least on a Mac. And I'm wondering if this is some kind of problem with differences between the encode of H.264 and the Mac versus the PC.
Alex?
And it could be. I definitely wouldn't render H.264 from a PC and then open it on a Mac. I would definitely render ProRes if I could. I know that there's a little bit of extra work, I think, to render ProRes on a PC, but it's worth it. And then I'd bring it over and see if it looks the same. That'd be the first step, is if I do a ProRes output, does it look okay on the Mac with the same settings? And compare it to the H.264. I'm not sure if that's the answer or not, but that'd be the first thing I tried.
And to boil it back a little bit to, is the simplest answer the right answer? Check your color spaces, not only in your project, but in your timeline. If you have any color space transforms that are in your nodes, just double check that there's not a mismatch somewhere in there, because sometimes that will lead to unintended results. And then I'll echo what Jason said. If you really want to get fancy, get something where you can output SDI to a monitor that has true scopes, and that'll be your North Star. Next question.
From the QR code, Gabriela Acesso Mestiera in Sault Ste. Marie, Robert Loblaw has argued in his Loblog for and against non-compete clauses. How do you feel about the recent FTC ban on these for non-executives, and how will it impact the industry? Is it really what helped make California into the world's 5th largest economy?
Go ahead, Jason.
I think this is an after, therefore, because fallacy. Non-competes have been unenforceable in California, I believe, for a pretty long time. I think California is kind of streaming ahead on the shoulders of the creators that have been drawn to live there. And that's probably a big part of that the sunshine, the location. But no, I don't think non-compete clauses really today are a big factor.
Courtney?
Yeah, I've been involved with lawsuits and non-compete clauses, and the lawyers tell me they're not enforceable. They are enforceable under very strict controls. They have to be a fixed length of time. They have to be for a certain person in a certain area, and so on. You can get away with it and enforce it, but they said it's not worth it in enforcing them. And so I don't think it's necessarily responsible for growing California to the 5th world's largest. Yeah, I think it is the weather and the location to shipping, et cetera, et cetera. But I think as far as non-compete clauses go, remember, you still can have problems if you're employees, and it's a big problem if you're a company that hires employees who directly interact, and those employees are the ones that directly interact with the clients. Because if they develop a rapport with your clients and then they decide to go to one of your competitors and take all of your clients with them, that can be quite problematic for the company and quite damaging. There are avenues that you can sue someone on if they go to work for your competition. One is theft of intellectual property or trade secrets theft. You can still sue someone over that if they go to work for your competitor and take some of your intellectual property or technical property or trade secrets with them. And that's usually how it's pursued in the courts these days. If they have, since there's no non-compete clause to enforce to keep them from taking your clientele or your information or your way of doing things over to one of your competitors.
Alex?
Given that it hasn't really changed the fact that we're all doing this, as Jason said, in California, where we don't really have non-competes here, it hasn't really killed the industry. I think we'll be okay. That's without the non-compete clauses. The question is whether it's constitutional. So there'll be some other, this will probably spend a couple of years in the courts, and we'll see what the Supreme Court says. But I think that so whether they can tell the states what they want to do is the piece of it. But I will say that as an employee, I'm very I'm very happy where I'm at ONINO Media. But I do like the fact that I'm not tied up. I could go somewhere if I needed to, but I wouldn't have to worry about for the next 2 years I can't do something or I can't do what I know how to do. That'd be very difficult. But again, while I'm very happy where I'm at, I think that as an employee it's good to have flexibility. As an employer, I didn't worry about it too much. In the early days I lost some work to employees who would build a relationship with my client and then wandered off and did it themselves. And so I learned to basically compartmentalize their knowledge base. And so people would think that they knew everything about how to do it, but if they actually went out and did it themselves, it would be a disaster, and then people would come back to me. You leave a couple pins out and not make it clear where those pins are. It was pretty useful. So that was kind of how I managed that from my perspective. Is not any one person other than. Not even me, to be honest, had all the pieces. So there were a lot of people with lots of verticals that they had there, and all of us together made an incredible product. But apart did not. So that was the way we kind of managed it.
Next question.
Next question is from Courtney Gooden in Hollywood, California, and here on the panel. Did anyone see the Supreme Court coverage on MSNBC yesterday using Unreal Engine? Or was it Ross 3D Virtual Studio?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I took them out. I don't know if we can show some of that.
I can show some of it here.
Yeah, okay, great. It was when you see them. Yeah, if the transition from in the studio to the Supreme Court, they had virtual Supreme Court, and obviously, is it playing now? Yeah, there it goes. They're floating around. They had to cover 3 hours of inside the Supreme Court, which, of course, they only published the audio coming out of the Supreme Court in America, no video. So they had to get creative to have 3 hours of live coverage. So they had this Unreal Engine model of the courtroom, and when anyone would speak, they would kind of float up to that justice and do a tight shot and then float the camera back to the person, to the lawyer at the podium there speaking. And then occasionally they'd float over into the interior studio, that, and then they'd move over and the transition from that to the transition from this to the Supreme Court was interesting because they pan over like the Supreme Court was another room off to the right, and the camera floats across there. Could we get this kind of coverage when we do our next NAB coverage? So that the panel could be just kind of floating motion picture images. And I was thinking, since they don't have video, they could use that new VESA app from Microsoft to animate their faces with their audio. Because we have perfect still pictures of all the players there, and they could just be, looking like animated real people. So you could create believable talking heads, just like Harry Potter.
Alex.
I think you got MetaHuman. I mean, we have some AI driven stuff. We could have the whole thing like there, and you know what that would do is they'd be like, "Hey, we'll let you have the video cameras back." This is horrible. But I do think that they're making as much lemonade as they can out of the lemons that they're given, which they don't have any visuals. This is the biggest trial, from a ratings perspective that they've had in a long time. I don't know what it is. It's definitely some kind of version of Unreal Engine. My guess is that it probably is Ross's tool, is probably what's producing this, because they have the ones that are the most built right now. But they could have hired somebody to build this all in Unreal Engine as well. But Ross's would be the least, that'd be the lowest lift for them to have something that was effective immediately. But still, it's a lot of work. It's still putting all those chairs in. Now, most of that, it does look like most of that is stuff that you could get off of the 3D Marketplace or off of TurboSquid. So it doesn't look like they put, they got everything in the right place. It doesn't look like they necessarily modeled everything by hand, which is fine. Anyway, I thought it was a fun use of this. I wouldn't replace real people with it if I had them. But I do think that we're going to see more and more of these kinds of 3D things. What's really happening here is that the use of Unreal Engine is really moving more and more into broadcast. And so, and we're going to be talking a lot about that as we kind of go into the next couple months with Nick Justishin on Tuesdays. So stay tuned for that, because we might analyze this a little bit, but we also will be talking about Avalanche, talking about the Zoom integrations, talking about, a lot of different uses of Unreal Engine.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, what could be more respectful to the highest court in the land than like a Terrence and Phillip style, in and out talking head of the Supreme Court justices. I can't get that out of my head. Seeing those graphics for the first time, I immediately, I definitely see Unreal Engine all over it. And it could actually just be very simple, in the same way that in Star Trek The Next Generation, there were just people, moving the doors behind those panels just with sliders. Accordingly, they may very well have simply had the 10 voices, the Supreme Court justices and then the two counsel, just simply sitting there and just pushing the buttons as they change the voices. It may actually have just been that simple, and I'd be surprised, in fact, now that I'm thinking about it, if it wasn't. But yeah, I can see very quickly how this could be rendered, and Andy Carluccio, I'll see you NAB next year. We're going to do it.
Alexander.
I applaud them for making the effort to do this, but I'm being totally earnest here. I think it would have been way cooler if everyone had Apple Vision headsets and they were just using their personas. I think that would be way more interesting and cooler to look at.
Courtney.
Yeah, somebody had, this was live, and somebody had to fly that camera around, because they're not cutting very much at all. They're flying it up to the person speaking, and then they fly back to over the shoulder only he's facing the lawyer that's speaking, and they kind of move to the left. Then sometimes they pull back and see the whole, because they had to sustain interest to this radio show on television for 3 hours straight without interruption. So somebody's got to be flying that camera around in real time and trying to make it look interesting, and they kind of drift back and forth. And if you play it back at high speed, it looks very bizarre, because it's like, ooh, ooh. Camera's moving all over the place. But somebody had to be in charge of flying that camera around in real time, depending upon who's speaking. Occasionally they would dissolve into a close-up, like there was a second camera, and then pull back. A lot of moving around.
Next question.
From the QR code, Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. How do old plasma TVs compare to a 4K UHD high dynamic, whatever modern average TVs are called?
Well, the plasmas are a lot heavier. We know that much. Go ahead, Alexander.
True. Yeah, so Chester, it really depends what kind of technology you're comparing it to. I do have to say, I handed off my 60-inch Sony plasma TV, which I had for well over a decade, to my parents, and it's 1080p, but it still looks fantastic for a 1080p TV. Very good color, and I've calibrated it, which makes a difference. But when you're comparing to modern day 4K stuff, not exactly a fair comparison, but there's also different types of technology with TVs. So you've got, IPS in-plane switching, edge lit. You've got mini LED now. You've got OLED. You've got stuff that does TVs that do local dimming, where it can actually shut off particular areas or zones on the TV to give you better blacks, deeper blacks, brighter whites, which of course plasmas were always really well known for doing that. So it really depends what you're comparing. So you have to look at that. Some really budget $300 to $500 TVs don't necessarily have the local dimming. So you want to look for something that has local dimming, and the lines of Vizio and TCL and Hisense actually make some pretty affordable ones that have local dimming with 4K and Dolby Vision support. So those actually look quite good right now. So if you're looking to upgrade from a plasma, I'd say it's about time to upgrade now.
Courtney?
Yeah, I remember the old plasma TVs around 20 grand. They were awfully heavy, huge amounts of power taken to run them. They were infamous for going bad fairly quickly, or color shifting, the color fading. One of the colors wouldn't last as long. Before the transition to OLED, which had a similar problem when OLEDs first came in, the blues had a different lifespan than the other OLEDs, but they had a similar problem with the phosphors that plasmas used. But the transition to an emissive display, gave you that much more contrasty look. So that's why everyone went, ooh, great, looks great. But they had all kinds of problems. Also, the OLEDs have better blacks than the plasmas do, because you can actually see there's a light gray tint when the lights are on in the room on a plasma. So unlike the OLEDs, which they have a surrounding that absorbs all the light unless the LED is turned on.
And Guy?
Yeah, I wanted to let Alex know that our friend Ben Wagner put up a link. He's now at Amazon. He put up a link yesterday about something that's coming to Prime Video along with Sony TVs, and it's auto-calibrated movies. So it'll automatically, if you're watching sports, it'll automatically change the frame rate, change the coloring. So it's something he's got like over 100 patents now with Amazon, and this was one I just put a link in the chat. I thought you might want to check it out, because I know you love the Apple TV for that, but this is something that is pretty futuristic. We can auto calibrate our TVs based on the content.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Next question.
Paul Walhus in Hot Springs asked, rewind.ai became limitless.ai to record your activity privately. Will this help with dementia, Alzheimer's, etc.? And there's a TechCrunch article there.
Alex?
But I think then that people would have to figure out how to use it. And I just think that going through all of that would be challenging. So I think it'd be really interesting as a time capsule of experience. I think that, but I think that there's an importance to forgetting the past, maybe not immediately, but it's important to keep looking forward. I think when we start recording the past or spending a lot of time in it, it can impede our ability to move into the future. So I think that maybe someone who has dementia or Alzheimer's and wants to remember things might make sense. But I think as a general tool, I would not recommend doing that. I think it's really easy for the past to fill up your future.
Courtney?
Yeah, and a bit of explanation for what this is. I looked at it yesterday. It's a little pendant that is basically a recorder or a link to a cloud account with a microphone array on it. It's about the size of a quarter with a magnetic back on it. It runs for about 100 hours, I think, or 10 hours. 10 hours with 10 or 100 hours. And what it does is it records everything around you, which it seems to be an incredible invasion of privacy, and up to the cloud, then transcribes it into a text file and then uses AI to be able to search it and search through past conversations, et cetera, to keep them on file. It seems like a great tool if you're having an argument with your wife or significant other. You said this. I did not. Well, yeah, let's go to the instant replay. Just go to the replay and settle that argument, and I'm sure the divorce attorneys will be lining up for this.
I think Progressive Insurance has the patent on that. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, it's a great tool for everyone, including the people who disagree with you. Having everything recorded is not a good idea.
Next question.
Next question is from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Just downloaded Central Control to utilize my PTZ cameras, vMix and X32. Not sure I will stick with it, but I'll give it a few months. Does anyone know how to stop payments to it? I'm not seeing anything obvious in the interface.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there is a monthly payment option. I went ahead and just bought it outright. But if you go into the rental model, it does say you can manage subscriptions from your PayPal account, basically. So they use PayPal as the back end. But before you go ahead and kill it, I would say to go watch some of their latest videos and watch all the features that have been unlocked, because the benefit is really that you don't have to set up a lot of this stuff. I mean, you could spend forever programming these macros. I mean, to me, the stuff that I would have had to do to get the X32 talking to vMix would take me weeks. So it's like, go ahead and watch some of their videos and learn what it does as far as there's now rundown features, there's teleprompter features, and then there's just more devices, all these different MIDI devices that it can control. So be sure to look through those videos and learn more about what it does before you kill it.
Alex?
Yeah, and I just saw Joe DeMax at NAB. so we were talking about having him on the show, so we'll see if we can't get him on to answer some of your questions more directly.
Next question.
Next one's from Francis Fry in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Alex, if the Sony FR7 is too big for a home studio, which camera would you choose next? FX6 or FX3? One of the newer ones. I'm ready to abandon my beloved but overheating Sony ZV-E1 for my video podcast. I value autofocus and shallow depth of field.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I couldn't get the ZV-E1 to stay on. Like I had it for a couple of weeks and I ended up sending it back because I just couldn't keep. I did the fake battery. I had a little fan on it. A lot of things on. I opened up I did all the things and just couldn't get it to stay on all day. Right now I'm using an FX30. If I could choose, I'd probably use an FX3. Now I did look at the LR1. I talked to Sony about that at NAB. It's not really built for video. It's really built for high-res stills, in a photogrammetry, drone, so on and so forth. The product manager was very clear. Like, this is not a long video shooting, kind of like live streaming from a camera kind of camera. So I was leaning that direction, but I do think that the Sonys as webcams are the best because of the autofocus and the short depth of field. The FX3 would give you a little bit more shallow depth of field that you'd have there. And I think that's pretty much the lowest cost. One thing to think about is old A7S2s and A7S3s also can do that, and they'll be a lot less expensive. But if you want a new camera, I think that the FX3 is probably a good one. It's expensive, but you've already spent some money on the E1, so you know that these things take a little bit there to put in. But I think that full frame sensor makes a pretty big difference. And again, the very fast autofocus is really useful, specifically in what we're doing. I think that there's other cameras like Blackmagics and so on and so forth. If you're doing film production, you've got a follow focus and you've got all the other things that are there that produce some really great results. But I think that for the webcam, I think that's probably where I'd still lean is into the FX3 as if I chose one right now, because I would choose if I chose one, I would choose an Arri, LF. I'd put, if you're asking me, like, what can I choose? But if we're talking about cost-effective solutions under $5,000, I would say the FX3 would be probably the one that I would choose outright. We were super happy with the FX6 last week, but it'd probably be a little bit overkill to put it in as a webcam. But I haven't sent back the cameras yet. I mean, they're all packed up and ready to go, but I might pull one out just to spend a couple days with it. So stay tuned. We might put a couple of them up just to see what it would be like. Alexander?
Yeah, and just as throw in another option for cost effective, I haven't actually personally used them, but I think for the format, I'm a fan of Panasonic stuff. And from what I've seen in the test, the autofocus is pretty good on these little box cameras, the Lumix BG-H1. And you can see that's on US dollars. They're on BH Photo Video, just under $2,000 there for
What's
that.
the frame size on that?
I think this one, it says MFT, so it's a micro four thirds. But you get you get professional features like SDI in and out, Ethernet control, and they have a good control app on these ones. So
I will say, if you're a fiend for short depth of field, the micro four thirds is still a little small. Like, it's just, that's what we found. Like, if you don't have a lot of space, so if you've got a lot of back space behind you, then a Super 35, or a micro four thirds works. But I think when someone says, "Oh, I really want when they say I really value short depth of field, I usually start thinking Super 35 or full frame in those. That's the only thing I would say related to how I choose those cameras.
Guy?
Yeah, there is a big brother to that camera. So that's the exact same form factor, exact same body, but larger full frame sensor. It's the BS1H or BSH1. So there is a lot of control to that camera too, and it can run off a PoE, which is pretty slick. And the interface with the Lumix Tether app is pretty sweet. If I had to choose, I know this was Alex's question, but I guess Alex got to both answer because it was framed towards Alex and Alex, but I'll be Guy and I'll say Red Komodo is a pretty nice camera too. If you're searching in that arena, I had one that I was using. I don't know if you guys remember last year, I had a fireplace set up, and that look was just amazing. And the control with the iPad app, it's really slick. I mean, the autofocus isn't as fast as the FX6, but if you don't need that, if you're just talking about pure look and the ability to change the cinema tone and everything like that, it's an amazing setup. So one more to look at.
Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia asks, my primary camera in my setup is my iPhone XS Max. I'm using Michael Forrest Shoot Pro app. This device is rumored to not be able to use iOS 18. Do I need to replace the iPhone with a newer model or move to something else?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, you could replace it if you can find a used one fairly cheap. If you're going to be spending money, you might think about moving to something like what we have recommended, the 4K Insta360 Link, where you have control over, you can have remote control over pan, tilt, zoom, or AI will follow you in a 1080p output. So it can be set to track somebody if they're moving around or leaning left and right, keep them centered. And it has a pretty good sensor in it. I've been really happy. I have one. I've been really happy with the output. It has a 1/2-inch sensor in it. So it doesn't have a lot of the computational photography stuff that the iOS apps have in them, but it might serve you well. It's easy to transport and easy to send, and interfaces as a USB already built in without a special app to bring it in. Now, if you need HDMI out, that's a problem.
Tony, the other thing that I would consider is there a feature in iOS 18 that you're really jonesing for that's going to make you want to upgrade? But then I look at the XS Max. It is a phone that came out in 2018. So at 6 years, it may be time to consider upgrading. But the great thing is when you look at the iPhone as a camera, and when you say in your setup, I'm assuming you mean like as your setup to capture you in an interview situation like we are talking right now. Yeah, even I have an iPhone 13. That's 2 generations old. It still looks really good. When you have either continuity camera or an app like Camo from Reincubate that gives you a little bit more control. So you got to look at what features are important to you, and then go from there. Alexander?
Yeah, and these days there's no shortage of options. I mean, in addition to using phones as web cameras too, and I know not everybody likes Micro Four Thirds, but I mean there are some, you can get some really good results out of Micro Four Thirds camera, and Logitech just introduced their own Micro Four Third camera. I think it's $1,000 US or something like that. Plus you have the new Blackmagic Micro Four Third pocket camera that has just come out. So there's a lot of options there, and I think with the right lens on a Micro Four Third sensor, like I'm running an f1.4 and I'm about 5 feet away from my GH5 camera, and that's the kind of shallow depth of field that I get. And like this behind me, I can touch it. It's like 3 feet away from me. So I think with the right lens and a Micro Four Third for about $1,000, you can. There are other options there other than just an iPhone too.
Next question.
Next question is from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. Is anyone using Sonic Fire software for production? It's a bit different approach to music for production. Curious what the panel thinks.
Alexander?
I haven't actually used it, but I was taking a look at it this morning, and it does look like it's a pretty neat program with some pretty interesting features. I mean, if you need something bespoke for music soundtrack creation, that's what you're doing, maybe something that you want to look at. One thing that stood out to me was this mood mapping feature and the ability. It looks like this is similar to a feature that was introduced in Adobe Audition a few years ago, where you can say, okay, I want this to be 30 seconds long, put in the music, and just have it retime the music to that length of time that you need it, which clearly I can see the value in that. That would save you a lot of time. So I'd really have to test it to talk more about it, but it looks very interesting, and it's only $199, so, very reasonably priced.
Guy?
Yeah, I used to use it quite a bit when I was teaching Final Cut Pro. I was showing how to build with a class. We would build a project, and it would wind up being, let's say, 42 seconds. And with Sonic Fire Pro, I could say, build me a song that's exactly 42 seconds with this mood, and it would give us a bunch of different samples, but the generated output would have a real beginning, a real middle, and a real end played by real musicians. And so, just to show you how much I've used it, I have tons and tons of CDs. These are back in the day. This is how you got the stuff in the libraries. Now you can just go online and have it build for you in the cloud. The really cool thing, though, is that it's royalty free, and that once you build it out, you can use it without getting flagged on YouTube ever. Now our team has been using a lot of Envato elements just because of speed, but now you're sounding like other people, whereas with Smart Sound Sonic Fire Pro, it's really tough to have somebody else sound like yours because you've got different lengths, and so you're building custom output. So it's a cool app.
Next question.
Next question's from Matthew LaCount in Oakland. LiveU has a setting for high quality audio. What are some strategies for getting higher quality audio for YouTube for a Capella singing event?
Go ahead, Alex.
You can definitely cover it with LiveU. I'm not sure exactly how high the high output is there. There are ways with some of the backpacks to get, I'm not sure which LiveU unit you're using. There are ways with some of the backpacks to get to 256-bit, transmission, but I'm not sure they are part of the standard operating standard output. So those things are things to kind of take a look at, but look at what the actual bit rate is. I'm not sure what high audio means on the encoder that you're talking about. So take a look at that. You want to maximize that. I don't think anything higher than 256 is going to make any difference because of the way that it's encoded once it's transcoded once it's at YouTube. So you want to give it a higher than what YouTube's doing, but I don't think that you're going to get anything by going to 320 or anything higher than that. So take a look at that and we'll let us know if you want to ask again what version of LiveU you're using, and we might be able to dig into it a little deeper because all the backpacks and the section and the encoders are a little bit different on each one of them.
Next question.
Next question is a QR code from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. I have DVDs from 2002. They have scratches. How or where do I repair or fix the scratches?
Go ahead, Alex.
Drive savers. You're not going to be able to fix them. Like there's a company, Drive Savers it would be expensive to do, but they can recover anything that's left on the DVD, whether it's a hard drive or a DVD or others. But I don't think that there's any way you're going to fix the scratches in a way that's going to really work. A lot of the scratches or what looks like scratches are usually, if it's 2002, are going to be flaking. And once it's flaked, it's gone.
Courtney?
Yeah, if there's oxidation in the metal, Alex is right. If you see little cracks that are underneath, they're underneath the plastic. They're not scratches, and there's no fixing that. There are scratch removal tools. Some people use toothpaste, which you can with the slightly abrasive. There's these. Mainly these are for CDs. I don't know if they're going to work on DVDs because most DVDs are multi-layer, and you really, a small scratch can really defocus the laser because it's a much finer laser, especially if it's Blu-ray. But if it's just a regular red LED, red laser DVD from the 2000s, this might work for you. You can try it. It's $30 or $23. It has little fingers that go over and rub a polishing compound across the surface and rotate the disc. It might bring it back. I don't know. It's just easier to look up that movie on streaming somewhere. capture.
Alexander?
Yeah, a professional repair place might be a better bet if it's something super important. I have used fairly successfully, but it can be hit or miss. I have used these types of disc, cleaning / resurfacing machines. $200 for something like this, and it has worked for me on some DVDs that have had problems on the surface. Blu-rays tend to be a little bit more resilient. That's one of the frustrating things about DVDs. It's really hard to repair them. Another thing you may want to do, where I live, actually down the street, there's a used video game store, and I've just find a lot of used video game stores have these repair machines. They'll charge you a small fee per disc. So you may want to search in wherever you are in Las Vegas there and see if there's any places that sell used video games. Call them up and see if they have a repair or a resurfacing machine that you can actually just use, because it might be cheaper as opposed to just buying your own. The place that I use, they charge $5 per disc, and I've actually recovered a few.
Next question.
Next question is from Ryan Thompson in Houston, Texas. Any thoughts on the new Ross Artimo robot for broadcast instead of humans? And there's a link to the Ross video.
Alex?
It looks pretty cool, pretty space age. So, I don't know if it's adding a ton of features that aren't in big PEDs, but those big motorized PEDs are much bulkier and much, just a much bigger operation. And I think that these ones look a little more futuristic, and they still have all of those features at least. Probably some of the stabilization looks like it might be a little bit better. I think for the environments that they're aimed at, newsrooms, and so on and so forth, it's big business, and I think that this is a really cool looking setup. So it'll be interesting to see more of the output. Maybe we can get them on the show.
Courtney?
One thing that bothered me in looking at the thing, it has this big U-shaped thing that the camera travels up and down in, and if you're lighting from, you want to get the lighting low and into the person's face to eliminate shadows. It would seem to me if you come up close, that thing is going to cast a shadow, especially if the camera's down low. You may be casting a shadow on your talent.
Yeah, I think it might depend on the size of what they're selling it to, I think, are pretty big spaces that I don't know if that would typically have jibs in them. I mean, I think that those lights are I don't think it would definitely work in a small environment. I think you're right about that. I think that most of the newsrooms I've been in, they probably wouldn't so many of the lights are so vertical. I'm not sure if they would interact with them that much.
Next question.
Next question is from Eric Strad in Essex, Connecticut. In the vein of infrastructure, what rental houses do panelists use for AV and separately computer networking? Thanks.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, locally, because these companies aren't nationwide. I use Glazier's camera. I use Northwest Camera Co. Kerner camera is another one. It depends on what you want to get. Like Kerner will have comms. If we want to get 20 grand worth of comms, I call up Kerner. If I need some exotic lenses, I'll call up my friend Dominic over at Northwest Camera Co. and ask him what's new, because he's always doing these really cool YouTube tests on lenses and has all these crazy $100,000 kits worth of lenses. So a couple tips. So make sure to establish a relationship with these guys ahead of time so that you're cleared, insurance-wise and ID-wise and everything, and make sure you get booked well in advance, because some stuff they have to outsource. And then there is a Discord for a second hour. If you guys vote it up, I can get us into the rental house so you guys can see behind the scenes. This guy, Dominic's got over a couple million worth of lenses. It'd be fun to go in there and do a second hour tour.
Alex?
Yeah, I think for AV, I haven't done a lot of computer networking. I mean, we usually keep that something that we do ourselves. But when it comes to AV and what we rent, the national brand that we use is VER. They were bought by PRG, so it's PRG now, and that's kind of everywhere. Like, so you kind of have a relationship with them to kind of fill in the gaps, but it's not as specially. When we start doing film work, we I don't know why my brain just turned off. I just had it in my head. I should have written it down. Able Cine. There we go. Able Cine is in LA and New York, is a place that we use often to do some of the rentals that we use. When it comes to sound in New York, we use Gotham Sound. When in LA, we use Location Sound. Those are some of the two best places in my opinion, to rent our sound equipment. In San Francisco, in addition to PRG, we use VideoFax. That's much more of a filmmaker's rental place, and oftentimes they're the easiest to work with. So we find it easier to sub-rent through them than it is to work with some of the other rental houses in San Francisco, which I will remain nameless. Yeah, and then we've got a couple, then of course there's grip trucks and other things that we may rent out. But when it comes to AV, those are the ones that we've used the most.
Next question.
Next question is from me. Lower thirds really make cutting vertical video impossible, and I don't have time to rebuild the clips from the ISO video. Should I redesign the lower third so that the person's name is in the middle, or vertical specific lower third graphics?
If I were in your shoes, Alex, I would probably get a clean feed for the 9:16 cut and redo something, because it's going to be, I think it would look awkward to have those lower thirds in the middle, but maybe Alex has a different idea.
I would really think about a clean feed is the way I would go with this. For this, I would, have a cut, but be able to output something that you can, or, one of the things that with gray matter that Chad Lafarge is working on is just doing the vertical and the horizontal together. He's doing it in vMix, where they're both basically just two different shows that are being produced. And so when you hit the button, there's a lower third for the 16:9, and there's a lower third. But being able to kind of fire that off, and I'm looking at that in a couple different places of automation of, can I control, two different switching systems or switchers, so that we can output two different outputs. And the real challenge with vertical is how much debris is on the screen around it. So that's the real challenge that you have with the vertical, is that you oftentimes want it to be as clean as possible, because anything you put on there is going to be going over words and all kinds of other things within the system. So unless you know exactly where you're going, it's sometimes hard to place anything, because shorts will be different than TikTok, which will be different than all the other ones. And so those are some things to kind of consider.
Next question.
Next question is from Paul Wahus in Hot Springs. Mood.camera is an iOS app that feels like using a retro analog camera. Discuss.
Courtney?
I really hate these things that take a nice, pure, pristine image and gunk it up to make it look like it's a crummy old, you took it with your, Instamatic back in 1955. It's same thing about, I have the same opinion of stuff that takes your nice digital recordings and adds rumble and scratch noise to make it sound like a vinyl, and distortion, high-end distortion. I guess for effect, if you're looking for effect, if you're trying to pretend something is vintage, a vintage found photo in the attic, you could do that. But I just don't like anything that, degrades the image just for the sake of making it look degraded.
Next question.
Next question is from the QR code Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. I remember an old story that required voting numbers of a high number to activate a blowtorch. 4th of July is coming up. Can we look forward to a new version?
Alex, let's light them up.
It was a flamethrower, not a blowtorch, and a 30-foot flame, and it was great. And I don't think I can do that in Northern California. All my neighbors will be really upset that I'm trying to burn down the entire hill. So not until we get some rain.
All right, next question.
Next question is from Paul Walhus in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Is Airchat the next Clubhouse? And there's a TechCrunch article there.
Go ahead, Alex.
Probably. For better or for worse. Probably. So anyway, but I got it. I'm on it. I don't understand it yet. We'll take a look.
Yeah, I think it's still invite. Not all of us have an invite, so we're working on getting there. But if you're sticking around for the weekend, we do have the Saturday Q&A coming up tomorrow, as well as our Sunday introspection. So the Sunday meeting is one that if you're looking for us on YouTube, you won't find that Sunday meeting, or you won't find the Sunday show, I should say, because we don't broadcast. That's more of an internal meeting where we talk about the show. It's more philosophical, introspective. But Saturday, after the Saturday meeting, after the Saturday show, that is when we have our weekly meeting. This one is going to be a volunteer meeting. So if you were at the new volunteer meeting last week, this is the volunteer meeting. So new volunteer is if you're new to office hours, you want to volunteer, you just go to officehours.global/volunteer, where you can see all of the opportunities for you to contribute, whether that's on a panel, as a reader, behind the scenes. There's asynchronous opportunities as well. If you're at that meeting, then this is the nuts and bolts of what are we doing, what's the state of the union with volunteering at office hours. So it's kind of a Sunday-style meeting for volunteering. And then a lot of us are still recovering from all the great NAB coverage that we had last week. And if you're new to the show and you've joined us since coming on from NAB, then welcome. If you'd like to find out more about everything that we do, you can just go to officehours.global. That's a great page where you can find out more just about here are the shows on the week coming up. But if you don't want to have to go to the website every single day to see, or every single week, to see what we're all about, you can click on the Join Us button on officehours.global. That will also let you get on our email list, and that email list gets to you every single morning. That tells you what we're talking about for the week going ahead. And there's also links to join the Discord and get into Makana, the backend chat, so you can have a more robust question asking and answering experience, because you can get in with our chat with the other producers, vote the questions up and down. And join the community. We've got some more questions for the second hour. Let's go ahead and go to the next question.
All right, next question's from Eric Hers in Hartford, Connecticut. We need an alternative to Amazon SYE. Who would like to help me build it?
Go ahead, Alex.
It's a big lift. That's a cliff. So I don't know if you might be able to find someone who wants to try to build it. But I would, going up against something that Amazon's already built, where would you go? Like, what would you build? So I guess that'd be the big question is, you'd probably need more information about what what platform you're going to do that on and how you're going to build that. But I think that it would be pretty high effort and a low potential for success. That'd be my concern.
Next question.
Paul Walhus in Hot Spring, Arkansas is back. Why are vector databases shoving aside old school MySQL, Postgres databases? And there's a link to a TechCrunch article there.
Go ahead, Jason.
Because of all the legacy. It's that simple. One-to-one, many-to-many, many-to-many, all these things that you had to learn in order to make SQL work, and Postgres SQL is just natural and visual. So I'm not surprised at all.
Next question.
And it looks like the last one from me. Has anyone compared live streaming quality to YouTube via mimoLive encoder versus the built-in encoder on the ATEM Mini line? Which is better?
Go ahead, Alex.
We haven't, but we should. And we should do this with all the encodes. I have what we call a Widowmaker file, and what we ought to do is just start pushing that file into a system. Basically, take a ProRes file with timecode, start pushing it through one after the other of these encoders to see what they do. And I think that if we did that, I think we'd be able to get a good sense of which ones are better than others. And I think that on as a separate movie or a second hour might be a really useful thing to discuss.
Alexander?
Yeah, I would love to see those results. In I've done minimal testing, not between Mimo and ATEM, but last few weeks with my podcast, I started streaming using the Streaming High profile, which I think it's variable bit rate. They're all variable bit rate, but it's about 5 or 6 megs. And then, I tried Hyperdeck Low and Hyperdeck High, got me all the way up to 20 megabits per second. I could see there was a marginal quality. Like, you can definitely see a little bit of a difference. There's something about the overall sharpness of the image that's just I'm not super happy about. And our quality here looks better. And of course, I don't have a very expensive rig like what we have in office hours, but that's kind of where I'm going towards. And so it's something about the ATEM Mini streaming is not.
And if you want to do the test before us, the way to do this is to stream it, pull that file down. Now you have to remember the problem is that you're pulling down a YouTube file, so it's not going to tell you exactly what's happening. What you really need to do is an HLS stream. So an HLS stream or streaming to something that's just going to simply capture those bits back is really what you want to try to find out how to do. But if you can't do that and you're just looking at how does it affect the YouTube stream, then you pull the YouTube stream down, you put it over top of the original file, which should be like an Apple ProRes 10-bit, completely uncompressed kind of thing. And do a difference map on it, and you'll see black and white. Where it's all black, it's exactly the same. Where it's white, it's changed, and you'll start to see macro blocks. I will warn you that as someone who's done hours of that with footage, it just ruins TV for you, because you'll never be able to unsee what you saw there. So just, if you're thinking about it, just know that your experience of all streaming platforms will be degraded by doing these tests.
And Courtney.
And here's what I use to test video cards and encoders with. See if I can break YouTube's encoder here. Is 9 of first-person shooter videos playing back all at the same time. And yep, it is breaking the encoder.
Well,
it's playing in real time.
YouTube, it's breaking Zoom. This is
Zoom,
not what Zoom's
excuse me,
built for.
not YouTube.
Yeah.
Zoom's encoder. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yeah, it's Zoom's encoder. Live encoder can't deal with the predictions of all those 9 first-person shooters running at the same time. It just chokes. But it is
Alexander?
a good test.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I'm going to direct this at Alex, because I know, Alex, you have a lot of experience with streaming coding. And one thing I noticed, especially with the variable bitrate stuff on the ATEM, is I noticed, when I cut to, when I'm pulling in Zoom feeds, the bitrate always seems to go down on the participants. But on my feed, there's something about my frame with this lighting where it wants more data. And I don't know why. It seems to have the ATEM seems to have a harder time with my
more
image.
detail. You've got more detail, lights and so on and so forth, and more detail in the background. You do variable bitrate is not a great way to stream. You should be streaming to YouTube in a constant bitrate. It's not built for VBR. It may accept it, but it's not a CBR is really the way to go there. And so I don't think that the ATEMs allow you to do that. I think they're all a VBR solution. And I think that makes sense in a lot of folks' heads. But when it comes to putting it into a system and having a reliable outcome, I'd rather send an 8 meg stream or a 10 meg stream and know that it's going to stay that way, no matter what it gets.
Well, that's going to do it for us on a wonderful Q&A Friday. Want to thank our panelists for joining us today. Your wisdom is always appreciated. Not any one of us is as smart as all of us, so it's a pleasure to get enriched by the great panel every day. Thank you to our producers for asking the great questions and keeping us on our toes. I always feel more well-informed because I get to see the amazing variety of questions come in. And thank you to the back-end crew, the incredible back-end crew, waking up every day to make this show a possibility. We couldn't do it without you. Cutting the show, making us look and sound good, getting us in the right places. Simply the best. Tlaloc traversal today, 29,000 miles. That's 46,000 kilometers, 226 million bananas for scale. We'll see you in After Hours.
Thanks, guys.
For the record, I think Cochrane Cloud makes it sound like you're a secret superhero. That's a lair name, if I ever heard.
That's a villain name.
The Cochrane Cloud.
You live in a volcano, don't you?
It looks like he has 2 little clouds behind him floating on those speakers.
It's like he's got the lair. It's overlooking
now?
the city. It's this little skyline.
Though that's Metropolis and Gotham City, so they can destroy both of them.
Your friends will not be able to
Cochrane
help
Cloud.
you now, young encoder. See you guys.
We'll see everybody.